Hello, and welcome back to Copilot Learning Hub, live. As you might have noticed, we have a co-host today. You.
Hi.
It's you. Yeah, say hi. And the reason we have a co-host is for two reasons. First of all, we're starting to do a thing where on Copilot Learning Hub, we are going to showcase some of our Microsoft partners and Microsoft ISVs who are doing cool things with Copilot in the world. And we want them to come on and share their stories themselves rather than me telling their stories. So that's one reason. The second reason is the topic of today's episode is slightly different than our other episodes. Usually, I introduce a guest, we dig deep into tech, and we get into the nuts and bolts of how we prompt this and prompt that. But today's episode is about humans. And I should not be talking to you all about humans. No, I shouldn't. No, I shouldn't. Because I'll be like, why though? So I decided to bring Chris, who specializes in the human aspect of copiloting, who also phoned a friend who's joining us called Vicky, who's in the UK right now. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us live at Copilot Learning Hub. Please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. So my name is Chris Huntingford. I'm the Director of Innovation at a company in the UK called ANS, right? So what we do is we focus on deploying AI to organizations. And one of my favorite things to deploy is Copilot, right? Or one of the many Copilots at least, Microsoft 365 Copilot. And yeah, we've had some interesting experiences with some of the organizations we've worked with. A lot of the time we feel like, hey, we're going to install some tech or deploy some tech, which is really good. But actually, what we discovered in this whole process is there's a big human element to this. And actually, culturally, there's a lot of things that need to change. This is why you need to stick on the tech and I will stick with the humans.
Right.
Okay. And yes, I did phone a friend, a very special human, who has actually deployed Copilot in an organization before, a couple of orgs, and working on it right now with me. And Vicky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Vicky Holman. I'm an ecosystem architect at ANS. I've been working with Chris since the beginning of July, so not long at all. Before that, I was working at Hargreaves Lansdown, which was where I was responsible for the rollout of Copilot there on the early access program. And it was a pretty big success. So I'm here to talk a bit about that and the human-y side of things, the adoption and engagement.
I'm so happy both of you are here because you have actual stories of how to do this outside of Microsoft.
Actual stories.
Because honestly, deploying at Microsoft was hilarious. But we also know we're a ginormous tech company. So I'm so curious about how this went in a company where their core business is not building tech, especially the tech we're rolling out. Because I can't imagine how just sudden it must be like, here's a tech. We must deploy it to everyone. You must use it. Be experts tomorrow. Off you go. I can imagine that's hard. Even for a non-human-y sort like me, I can imagine that this would be kind of a complicated process.
Yeah, it is. And the one thing I just want to say about Vicky is that Vicky is a secret geek. So please don't actually think that Vicky's only job is doing adoption and things. Actually, she's very proficient in tools like Purview and that. So yeah, there's a lot of experience to be had here. Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Vicky, tell us everything you've learned from actually doing this kind of work. I'm very, very curious. So is our audience.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I'll just run through some slides. So basically, I think the main thing, we've already touched on this is all about the people. It's a massive people thing, not so much a tech thing, maybe 50% as Chris spoke about earlier. So basically, I think some organizations, they might have great sort of change management processes and adoption teams and all that kind of thing, but a lot don't. And Copilot isn't one of those technologies that you can just throw out there and hope that it sticks. It's not like, say, a CRM tool that you have to do your job. Copilot's something that we want people to use, we think they should use, but it's kind of their choice, really. It's not something that they have to do their job. So also, it's kind of a very personal, individual thing. So the way I use Copilot would probably be very different than the way Chris uses Copilot. And even if we were doing the same jobs, that would be the case. And it's such a huge change in the way of working. I liken it to sort of the dawn of the internet or something like that. It's such a change to how people do their jobs. So that's why it's a people thing. You can turn on the technology, that's all well and good, but it's the people that you need to make this change a success. So from my experience, there's a few sort of people-sided barriers, and I've got them listed here with my little hurdlers jumping over barriers. So one of them is skill. And, I've just said that it's a changing way of working. And it's one of those things where you have to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to prompt well to get most out of Copilot. That's really important. And you have to learn to kind of encompass Copilot into your daily work. It's a habit that you have to get used to. Another aspect is fear. So we all know that AI has been around for decades, but generative AI is a much more recent thing. And certainly in the last couple of years with the release of ChatGPT and things, it's really come into the forefront of people's consciousness. And with that, there's been stories about this being the end of humanity and it's out to take all your jobs and all that kind of thing. So naturally, people are going to be slightly reticent sometimes about using it. And another barrier is time. So this is a bit of a catch-22 situation, because obviously one of the great things about Copilot, everyone knows is, wow, it's going to save you so much time. But because you have to learn that new skill and make it a habit, it takes a bit of time before, you have to put in a bit of time to get that time back and really see those benefits.
Okay, so
if we don't...
Vicky, what I loved about that framework is that we technologists, right, we fixate on that first one called skill. It's like, hey, implement the thing, teach people to use it, move on. The fear, the overcoming fear, like why aren't people learning it? They're afraid they'll be replaced, et cetera, et cetera. That one I've heard about. The third one I've not thought about, which is people are saying, I just don't have time to learn this thing that's going to save me time. And
that was actually pretty big. When I rolled out a Hargreaves Lansdown, it's pretty big,
It's a big deal. In fact, one of the deployments we're doing now, the folks we're working with are actually saying, even taking half an hour out of a week to go and relearn something that they can do manually really quickly is extremely difficult.
Wow.
But ultimately, you've got to give some to make some, right? And that's really important. So that's amazing. Thank you, Vicky.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, no worries. So, if you don't overcome the barriers, I don't think this is really specific to Copilot, but obviously you'll get colleague dissatisfaction, risks to future products where you've got that sort of change, lethargy, apathy, failure to meet success criteria and reduced usage. But that's not specific to Copilot, but I just think the human side is much more important with Copilot. So
can I ask a quick one? On the previous slide, you have success criteria in there. Did you have any specific ones that you wanted to mention around what success would mean to you?
No. So this was really interesting. In my particular experience rolling it out at Hargreaves Lansdown, we were accepted onto the early access program, and we were told we did not need success criteria or a purpose. It was going to be purely experimental, which sounded at the time to be incredibly freeing. And we were so excited. We were like, oh my God, the opportunities are endless. But actually then when you get towards the end of the early access program and you want to validate what you've done, and you don't have success criteria, it's almost impossible. But I was going to touch on that in a later slide. But it's cool. It's an interesting point. Here we go. So the first steps I think that you've got to do before you start thinking about, rolling any licenses out to anyone is to identify a stakeholder and senior leadership. So there's got to be someone who's really behind you and really shouting from the rooftops about how great Copilot is and how this is such a positive thing. Nothing to be scared of. We're not trying to replace your jobs, and Copilot is great. And you want to have, as we just touched on, a purpose and success criteria, because otherwise you're kind of drifting free and you don't really have a direction to go, and it's really hard to prove what you've done at the end of sort of any kind of pilot or anything like that. And then I found what was particularly important for us was community. So this was business champions, which I know means different things to different people. But in this context, it was people we'd identified across the business who had previously shown great engagement with technology projects, were interested, liked to learn, liked to help other people. And we approached them and said, hey, can you come together and work with us, the IT team, the project team, on the rollout of Copilot. And that was absolutely key. We're a small team, but if you've got little pockets of people within the business who are on board and engaging and pushing this forwards, it's brilliant. And also I think if you're in the business, it's one thing for someone from IT going, oh, do you know what, you need to use this product. If you've got other people in the business saying it, it makes a bit more of a difference.
I like that you've got those three categories of people, because there's the stakeholder, right? Some sort of a senior person who's saying, we're doing this.
Yeah.
This is part of your job now. It's not some random skunkworks project that some people are doing on the side. Because we've all seen that does not work.
That doesn't.
That does not work, because then you've got shadow AI issues. So I love that you've called out the stakeholder role. And then you've got, the IT implementation people who, that would be all of us. And then you've got like the actual community you need to build in-house.
Yeah.
So people learn from each other rather than IT trying to push use cases that we do not understand all these use cases.
Yeah.
But that stakeholder role is more important here than it has been, I feel, in other things. Because before it's kind of assumed, like you're saying, you're going to use the new dev tool, devs. Right? This is not news at 11.
Exactly, yeah.
You should use VS Code to write code, obviously.
Yeah.
But because this is not as obvious, that stakeholder kind of beating the drum, waving the flag, winds up being more important. And it's so interesting that you've seen that exact same thing in your business that we're seeing across businesses in the US as well.
Yeah.
I've also found something interesting. Like when you're going through this whole process of generating a community, which I agree with you, by the way. For me, that stakeholder is really key. But then getting people to create a movement. I call it the first follower movement, right? So like you'll be a champion, and then you'll have other people following the champion. But that first follower is the most important, because if you get that person to do something and actually use the tools, it'll ripple effect across. And also in communities, right? Like I know you've experienced this because you and I have spoken about this before, is that people support one another. So it's not just about using the tools. It's like, hey, I figured out a cool prompt. How could I make it better? Did you find that in your previous delivery?
Yeah, definitely. You'd have people sort of posting in the Teams channel going, oh, do you know what, guys? I just tried this today and this happened. And other people going, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm going to try that. Thanks so much. And, people go, oh, do you know what? I took what you tried there and did this. And then this happened. And it was just, it created such a nice buzz about it, such a nice vibe. That, people were just, and it's the first time I think at my previous company that something had been done in that way in terms of a technology rollout, and it made it, people were just really excited about it. It was great.
That's cool.
That's great. I love that.
Cool. So then next on to the actual kind of adoption and rollout. So you need to think about who, obviously. Now, if you wanted to achieve the quickest deployment of licenses, you just sort of throw them out there as like a flat drop. But then you're not really going to get your adoption and engagement right. So you really need to think about who you're going to roll out to first, like, obviously your champions, your project team and all that kind of thing, and roll out in these, I know Chris has called them release rings. And what's great about that is it gives you the chance to go through that adoption and engagement, and it gives you the chance to learn from things that have gone really well and things that haven't gone so well. And that's going to be different for each organization because everyone's unique and every organization is unique. So you can roll out and you can learn as you go with these release rings. Then the other things is comms. So again, your stakeholder comes in here, your senior one, he's going to be there at the town halls shouting about how great Copilot is and how it's coming soon and it's going to be brilliant for everyone. You're hopefully going to have it on the intranet. You get out in the business yourself, be attending people's meetings, just promoting it and showing it to be the positive change that it is. And then obviously for those individuals getting licenses, they need training and sort of demos on how to prompt, how to get the best use out of it. Because it is, I remember when I first got a Copilot license and I was just like, all right, well, here's a pre-built prompt, click on that button, see what happens and that kind of thing. But actually, as you start using it and you work out how to prompt properly, you get so much more out of it. We did this also in the form of like drop-ins, and it was like almost Apple Genius bar style. So you'd just be like in a room all day, and then people could just wander in and out as they wanted and have a little one-to-one with someone on the project team and learn a bit more about Copilot. And then scenario-based workshops are really useful too, because it means that you can take a persona from the business and, think, is there something that they do or people in their department do that would really benefit having Copilot. So it could be, is there a department who has to digest a large amount of content and summarize that? Or is there a department who does a lot of minuting and then could use that kind of meeting summary functionality? And then that works well for if you're trying to think about where your Copilot licenses might add more benefit. So that's really useful.
I like that a lot.
That's great.
That
actually.
scenario-based workshop.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's actually a really important point because I yell a lot about scenario-driven approach because I think a lot of the time when using tools like Copilot, people focus on the use case so much and they're like, what is the use case? And they try and drive return on investments through a simple use case, and the use case being merging a document or like taking minutes from a Teams meeting. But actually that fits into a much wider scenario. And if you focus on the scenario, like the story, and I'll give you an example, like customer onboarding, okay? You don't just focus on one part of it to determine ROI, you focus on the full process. And actually we're seeing more success there than fixating on the smaller uses of it, right? Did you find that as well, Vicky?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a look at, we invited various, let's call them personas, people, humans in from the business to do these workshops and try and understand sort of how their processes and the things they were doing sort of would benefit from Copilot. So yeah, definitely it wasn't as simple as merge a document like you say, or compare a document or something like that.
I like those drop-in things you said too. Where people could come and drop in and ask you questions. That's clever.
Loved that.
Yeah, that's clever.
That's genius.
We had our first one and we were like, drop-ins and come. Second one, people were queuing at the door before we opened, all ready to go, all excited.
I like that. We should add that to various playbooks. I like that so much.
Because you're creating excitement, like you're actually creating because I still think people love the in-person, like, hey, it's like the little micro hackathon type approach. I love that actually.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I keep interrupting you because I kind of like this. This is fun.
But no, it's cool. So aside from the adoption, we weren't just like, okay, so we'll do adoption and then off you go, see you later. It was, we had to continuously engage people. Now, at my previous place, we had 75 to 80% utilization, activity the whole time. And I think that was really very much down to our engagement. It's really high, really high. So we had the Teams channel that I mentioned where people were like, tried this prompt, how did it go? What did you do? And all that kind of like general chatter and excitement. And we sort of said, we try and post in there as a project team like once a day. Just to try and keep that energy going. We did regular videos and how-to guides. So obviously you get your sort of videos and stuff off the Microsoft website, but if you do your own videos in-house, then you can make them a bit more specific to what things you might need to do within your organization rather than just being a sort of generic Microsoft one. Sorry.
No, it's true. It's true.
But it is true.
It's true. Because the Microsoft ones they're not going to relate to your business. Like we do not know how to run a legal firm. Even Microsoft legal department will be different than a legal company. These are not the same animal.
Absolutely. So we did weekly drop-ins as well. So you could drop in either face-to-face or virtually to just ask for a bit of support or chat about Copilot. And then constantly getting feedback. So we did that in the form either of like little surveys, just in forms, just to get an idea of sentiment. We also did interviews, and the business champions sometimes did those interviews, and they were really good because you got insights back that you might not have got from just a simple survey, and you got some interesting ideas, and it was just really insightful. And then also we made sure to get feedback from people who were recipients of Copilot generated content, because it's all very well to go, do you know what, I smashed this out 10 times quicker, but if the quality is not there, it kind of negates the benefit. We had book a refresher with a champion. Now this ties into the time thing. So quite often people started off with a Copilot license with all the best intentions, and then they were like, I just don't have the time. I'm on this project for like a month now and I can't put the time aside for it. Then they'd come back, there'd be a little dip in their work, and they'd be like, right, I'll get on with this Copilot. But they didn't really have like fresh memory from the demos and the drop-ins and stuff. So they were able to book something in with a champion just to go back through it again. And then we also did a little internal podcast type series, Coffee and Copilot, where we had people come in and chat about Copilot or AI in general. It didn't have to be Copilot. So that was really good. That was really popular, actually. So
Coffee
and Copilot.
Yeah, I feel like that should be an actual thing.
Coffee and Copilot should be a thing. It should be part of like the framework, the playbook, whatever it is.
I think you just invented something.
I like how we're inventing things on the show.
This makes me like 3 this time.
Yeah, I know. So this is kind of like my last slide, and I know I mentioned that we didn't have success criteria, but for me, it was a huge success, and I think it was such a success because of the impact on the individuals. You know, I've put some quotes up there. It changed my life. I no longer feel like I'm at a disadvantage. I don't have to work into the evening anymore, and it's made work exciting. And there's actual quotes that people gave me during feedback sessions, which is just huge. You know, it's so inspirational. And you know, we found, especially with our neurodivergent community, that it was really a game changer for them. We had people who struggled with auditory processing. So then being able to have those summaries and action notes off the back of meetings, or severely dyslexic, so being able to summarize the content rather than having to read huge documents. And even people who, you know, English wasn't their first language. So we had an office in Poland, and they found that using the sort of draft options in email and things made it so much easier to communicate with their counterparts in the UK. And that for me is the success. It's, you know, it's the human element, and I genuinely found it joyful receiving this kind of feedback and seeing how much it had helped people.
That's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. I think I really identify with the neurodivergent part because I think personally it's helped a lot on what I do, and I know for Vicky it has for you as well. Like I don't remember what life was like without using Copilot, but you know, obviously taking the time to learn it and get to know the tool, the kind of playback and the feedback has been unbelievable. And it's quite cool. Like I love the fact that people have said this, because that actually shows the high impact that it's had. I mean, the one working into the evening, I mean, if you've got a family and you're spending all your time on your laptop, and now all of a sudden you have this tool that helps you kind of be not necessarily more productive, but do things in a better way. Like, I think it's absolutely brilliant. That's wonderful feedback.
I love that feedback. And honestly, I resonate with some of this. Like, I don't remember having a meeting without Teams recap.
Nope.
We had an in-person meeting the other day, so you all will appreciate this. We had an in-person meeting in a room, no Teams meeting. And it was the first time we've had a meeting without a Teams. And we didn't know what to do with ourselves, because we talked and we're like, did someone write this down?
Did someone have to take notes?
Yeah, and we forgot. We all forgot to do this, and we were sitting there like, we need a Copilot for this. We need a Copilot for this. So we've started to just have a Teams meeting going in the background.
That's what we do.
In-person meetings to get a recap. Because we don't know what to do anymore. Like, here's a feature, but it was fascinating because it just happened, and we were planning a big conference, and we were thinking like, a big portion was it on the whiteboard and this and that. We're like, how do you exist without a recap in this world? I don't know.
I know.
Right? It's already happening. Like, how do you live without spell check? I do not know. How do you live without Teams recap? Also, I do not know.
Yeah, these two things I think.
Do you remember we used to handwrite things?
No.
I don't know.
Absolutely not. Nope. I can't even read my own handwriting, let alone, you know.
No, that is a job for AI, reading handwriting. Yeah. Vicky, this has been so fascinating, just hearing this journey, because this part, I think, I avoid the human part because it's hard. This part is hard. It's hard.
It is.
Because there's so many variables. Like code, you write it, if it runs once, it's going to run by itself until there's some security issue, right? But in general, this human thing is like so complicated because it may work amazing for this group of people, and this group are like, no, not at all. So I think it's very, very interesting how you had such high percentages of adoption in an organization, like in a business, and you were able to get this kind of, just this kind of response. I think that's really magical.
Yeah.
It is. It's incredible. And I think, Vicky, I've seen you working firsthand, and I've seen what you do. And again, folks, just so that you know, Vicky is not just in like change management and that type of thing. She is deeply technical, right? And I think what's special is you've been able to take your technical skills that you've learned through like M365 and Purview and that, and you've been able to weld them to your ability to do change management and adoption. And I think that is a very special skill. And if I could tell people that are in change management, get more technical,
Right.
and people that are technical, start learning a bit more around like the culture of the way organizations work and truly listen to them, because we have a perception on like, hey, this is how we should do things. But actually, I think what's special about you is you truly listen to the organizations you work with, and you're able to adopt and adapt your plan to the things they really need, not what you think they need.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you started with listening to what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think this is great.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
You two, this has been a fascinating conversation. I did not think I would get so enthusiastic about this conversation, but this has been extremely fascinating. So thank you, Vicky, so much for joining us. Thank you for coming and crashing us in the studio.
That's cool. Thank you for having me. I
And-
haven't broken anything. So we're good.
It's been a whole 20 minutes.
Listening to me go on.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank
and
you,
thank
everyone.
you all for joining us for another episode of Copilot Learning Hub.